Hello and welcome to her revenge arc. I'm glad you could join me tonight. Find a comfortable place, perhaps pour yourself a warm drink, and allow the world outside to fade away. The story I have for you this evening is one of quiet battles and silent victories. It's about the echoes of the past and the sterile hum of the present, and how sometimes, the things we dismiss as obsolete hold a power we've long forgotten. It's a story about time, technology, and the enduring strength of a quiet mind. The air in the Innovatech Solutions office always smelled faintly of burnt coffee and ambition. It was a clean, sharp smell, layered over the ozonic hum of servers and the almost imperceptible scent of glass cleaner used on the miles of interior walls. I suppose to most it was the smell of progress. To me it was just the smell of Monday. My desk was an anomaly. A small island of analog warmth in a sea of minimalist chrome and white plastic. I had a real plant, a hardy pothose that had survived 3 office moves. Its green leaves cascaded over the side of a ceramic pot my late husband, Richard, had made in a pottery class we took together 20 years ago. Next to it sat a framed photo of us, smiling on a windy beach, long before the world decided that memories should live behind a screen. My keyboard was an old, comfortable ergonomic model, its keys worn smooth and silent from years of use. It didn't clack with the aggressive self-importance of the mechanical keyboards favored by the younger developers. It whispered. My corner of the open-plan office was by the largest window, a supposed perk for seniority. From my vantage point on the 17th floor, I could see the city spread out like a circuit board, a tapestry of interconnected lives and systems. I often found myself tracing the paths of cars and pedestrians, thinking about the invisible data streams flowing alongside them, the digital lifeblood of the metropolis. I had been a part of building those streams in one form or another for most of my adult life. I was, by the office's unspoken standards, a fossil. At 57, I had more years of experience than our CEO had years of life. I had coded in languages that were now footnotes in university textbooks. I remembered the dial-up modem's screeching handshake, the thrill of the dot-com boom, and the sobering chill of its bust. I had seen technological empires rise and fall like Roman dynasties, each one convinced of its own permanence. This long view gave me a certain patience, a placidity that was often mistaken for slowness or, worse, indifference. The primary architect of this misconception was Liam. Liam was 26, sharp as a tack, and possessed an ego so radiant it could have powered a small data center. He was the quintessential tech prodigy of his generation, fluent in every new JavaScript framework that appeared, a vocal proponent of crypto, and a firm believer that any technology older than his undergraduate degree was Bronze Age technology. He had a sleek laptop covered in stickers for obscure open-source projects, a standing desk he rarely sat at, and a way of speaking in a rapid-fire staccato of acronyms and buzzwords that left most of the marketing department nodding in a daze. His mockery of me was not overt, not the kind of thing one could take to human resources. It was a campaign of 1,000 paper cuts, of subtle condescension and dismissive gestures. He called me Eleanor, but his tone always managed to italicize the name, making it sound like something unearthed from a Victorian novel. "Hey, Eleanor," he'd say, leaning over my monitor, his own scent of expensive peppery cologne invading my space. "Just wanted to give you a heads up. We're deprecating the old authentication API. We're moving to a more robust OAuth 2.0 flow. I can send you a link to a For Dummies article if you want. It'll get you up to speed." He'd say it with a smile, a bright, toothy smile that didn't reach his eyes. I would just nod slowly, my fingers paused over my quiet keyboard. "Thank you, Liam. I'm familiar with OAuth 2.0. I helped implement a version of it for a client back in 2012. My response would only earn a small, patronizing huff of a laugh. "Right. Well, this is the new version. A lot's changed." He was the kind of young man who believed history began the day he discovered it. The fact that the protocols he used were built upon foundations laid by people like me, by people like Richard, was an irrelevant detail. To him, we weren't pioneers. We were just the old guard, clinging to our outdated ways, too stubborn or too slow to adapt. The most frequent target of his derision was my choice of tools. While he and his cohort lived and breathed in Visual Studio Code, with its endless plugins and flashy themes, I often worked in a simple, unadorned terminal window with a Vim editor. But my greatest sin in his eyes was my continued affection for Perl. "I saw you running a script earlier," he said one afternoon, startling me from a deep focus. He was perched on the edge of the empty desk beside mine, sipping a can of some garishly colored energy drink. "From the syntax, it looked like Perl? Is that even still installed on the company servers?" "It's a versatile language," I said, my eyes not leaving the screen, "particularly for data munging and system administration tasks." He let out a short, sharp laugh. "Data munging? Wow. People don't munge data anymore, Eleanor. They build ETL pipelines with Python and Airflow. They use dedicated data science libraries. Nobody has written a line of Perl in a decade. It's a dead language. A relic. A digital fossil." That was his favorite term for me, usually muttered just loud enough for me to hear as he walked away from my desk. "The digital fossil is at it again," he'd whisper to his friend, Kenji, as I used a command line tool instead of a graphical user interface. I never rose to the bait. I had learned long ago that arguing with that brand of arrogance was like wrestling with a ghost. You only tired yourself out while they passed right through you. My work spoke for itself. My projects were always on time, under budget, and remarkably stable. The systems I designed and maintained were the unglamorous workhorses of the company. The internal reporting engines, the data backup and recovery scripts, the automated server health checks. They weren't flashy, but they were the bedrock. They worked. Quietly, reliably, day in and day out. Like me. My quietness was a landscape shaped by loss. Richard had been the loud one, the boisterous visionary. He was a brilliant programmer. A man who saw the internet not as a series of protocols and cables, but as a new frontier for human connection. We met in the late 90s, both working for a startup that aimed to create a dynamic, personalized web experience, a laughable ambition at the time, given the limitations of the technology. We fell in love over late-night coding sessions, fueled by bad pizza and a shared belief that we were building the future. He was the one who taught me the strange, beautiful syntax of Perl. "It's the duct tape of the internet, Ellie," he used to say, his eyes sparkling. "It's not always pretty, but it can hold anything together." When he passed away from a sudden heart attack 5 years ago, the silence he left behind was immense. The code we wrote together became a kind of memorial. Every time I wrote a regular expression or a simple script to automate a tedious task, I felt a connection to him, to that shared past. It wasn't nostalgia for the technology itself, but for the spirit of creation we had shared. Liam, with his casual dismissal of that history, was unwittingly trampling on sacred ground. Still, I endured. I found a certain meditative peace in my work. I would come in, make my cup of Earl Grey to never the burnt office coffee and settle into my tasks. I would listen to the low hum of the office, the distant traffic, the frantic tapping of younger fingers on newer keyboards, and I would write my code. I was a stonemason in an age of 3D printers, and I was content with my craft. But even the deepest well of patience has a bottom. Mine was about to be found. It happened on a Wednesday. The air in the office was electric. Our CEO, a man named Marcus Thorne who wore expensive sneakers with his suits, had called an all-hands meeting. He stood on the small stage in the main atrium, a large screen behind him displaying the company logo against a pulsating blue background. "Team," he began, his voice echoing slightly. He had the kind of forced, booming enthusiasm that venture capitalists seem to love. "We are at a pivotal moment. The world is changing faster than ever before. AI is not the future. It is the now. And Innovatech is going to be at the forefront of that revolution." A smattering of polite, corporate applause. I took a slow sip of my tea. "To that end," he continued, "I am thrilled to officially announce the 2023 Innovatech Annual Hackathon." The screen behind him changed, displaying a slick graphic with the words, "Hackathon. Dawn of AI." A genuine buzz went through the younger staff. The hackathon was a major event. It was a 48-hour marathon of coding, creativity, and caffeine, with a significant cash prize and, more importantly, immense bragging rights on the line. The winning team would get their project fast-tracked by the company and present it directly to the board. It was a shortcut to visibility and promotion. The theme this year, Marcus announced, his voice dropping for dramatic effect, is Bridging the Gap, Connecting Legacy Systems with Modern AI. My head, which had been bowed over my teacup, lifted slightly. An interesting theme. Most companies wanted to pretend their legacy systems didn't exist. They were the embarrassing, cobweb-filled attics of the corporate world. But they were also where the core data often resided, locked away in arcane formats and ancient databases. We have petabytes of data from our older clients, Marcus explained. Valuable historical data that is currently sitting unused, locked in outdated formats. The challenge is to build a tool that can unlock this data, process it, and feed it into our new proprietary AI model to generate actionable insights. The team that can do this most effectively, most efficiently, and most elegantly wins. My eyes scanned the room. Liam was already in a huddle with Kenji and a sharp front-end developer named Chloe. His face was alight with a predator's grin. This was his territory.
AI, Modern Frameworks, Flash Interfaces.
He probably saw the legacy systems part as a trivial, annoying hurdle before the real fun began. I had no intention of participating. The hackathon was a young person's game, a spectacle of sleep deprivation and performative genius. I had nothing to prove. My work was my proof. I planned to spend those 2 days quietly catching up on documentation and enjoying the relative peace of an empty office. Later that afternoon, as the buzz from the announcement began to settle, I was running a diagnostic script on one of our oldest servers. It was a delicate operation requiring a careful touch. The script was one I had written in Perl years ago, a complex little thing that checked for data integrity across multiple archaic database tables. Liam strode past my desk, phone pressed to his ear, deep in conversation with his newly formed team. No, the data ingestion is the easy part, he said, his voice loud and dismissive. We'll just spin up a Python container, use pandas to read whatever flat files they give us. It's a solved problem. The real work is in the neural network architecture. We're going to build a slick React front-end to visualize the output in real time. It's going to blow Marcus's mind. He paused by my desk, catching my eye. He lowered his phone slightly, a smirk playing on his lips. Hey Eleanor. Heard the theme? Connecting to legacy systems. Maybe you could dust off your what was it? COBOL? And help out. He winked, then continued his walk, his voice fading down the hall. Yeah, I'm back. So for the UI, I'm thinking a dark mode theme with neon data visualizations. Something inside me, a quiet tectonic plate that had been dormant for years, shifted. It wasn't anger, not exactly. It was a deeper, colder feeling. It was the casual, unthinking erasure of my entire professional life, of Richard's life, of the very foundations he was building his flashy castle upon. He called Perl a dead language. He dismissed the challenge of legacy data as a solved problem. He didn't see the complexity, the nuance, the history. He saw a dusty relic to be kicked aside. He saw me as a dusty relic to be kicked aside. I looked at the terminal window on my screen. The Perl script was still running, its output scrolling by in neat, orderly lines. It was a language Richard had called the duct tape of the internet. It was designed for exactly this kind of problem. Wrangling messy, unpredictable, legacy data. It was powerful, concise, and brutally efficient if you knew how to use it. And I knew how to use it. Every symbol, every sigil, every arcane shortcut was ingrained in my memory. I closed my eyes for a moment. I could almost feel the phantom warmth of Richard's hand on my shoulder, hear his voice in my ear. It's not always pretty, Ellie, but it can hold anything together. In that moment, a decision formed, not with fire and fury, but with the cold, clear certainty of a glacier calving into the sea. I was going to enter the hackathon. I was going to enter it alone. And I was going to use a dead language to show a young man who had mistaken novelty for progress what true elegance looked like. I opened my email client. The registration link for the hackathon was still in my inbox. My fingers steady and silent on the worn keys of my old keyboard, typed my name into the form. Under team name, I paused for a long moment. Then I typed 2 words. The fossil. I hit send. The battle was joined. Not with the bang but with a quiet, determined click. The day of the hackathon arrived with the charged, festival-like atmosphere I had expected. The main atrium had been transformed. Tables were clustered together, bristling with monitors and laptops. A long counter was laden with the cornucopia of caffeine and sugar. Energy drinks, coffee urns, boxes of donuts and bowls of candy. The air thrummed with the mixture of excited chatter and electronic music pumping from a speaker in the corner. It felt less like a corporate event and more like a LAN party from my distant past, albeit with better funding and more expensive hardware. I watched the teams assemble. Liam's group, who had christened themselves AI Vengers, had claimed a prime spot near the presentation stage. They were a whirlwind of activity, whiteboarding complex diagrams, their voices a constant stream of jargon. We'll use a TensorFlow model deployed on a Kubernetes cluster, Liam was saying, gesturing expansively. The front end will be a serverless React app. The data pipeline will be Python, of course, fully containerized. He sounded like he was reading from a brochure for the future. They, and most of the other teams, were armed to the teeth with the latest technology. It was an arms race of frameworks and platforms. I, on the other hand, arrived with my trusty, slightly battered laptop and a thermos of hot Earl Grey tea. I found an unoccupied table in a far corner, away from the main hubbub, near the window that looked out over the city. It was my usual spot, my island of calm. As I sat up, I felt the curious glances of the other participants. A solo competitor was rare. A solo competitor of my age was unheard of. I saw a few of them whisper to each other, their eyes flicking from me to my old-fashioned laptop. I knew what they were thinking. Is she a judge? A mentor? She can't possibly be competing. Liam noticed me, of course. He swaggered over, a can of energy drink in his hand. Eleanor. Bold move going solo. You find a team. I'm fine on my own, thank you, Liam, I said, carefully plugging in my power cord. He peered at my screen. I had a simple black terminal window open. Whoa, Retro. You're not actually going to try and code in that, are you? Don't you want a proper IDE? I can get you a license for JetBrains, the company will pay for it. This is what I'm comfortable with, I said evenly. And what are you planning to use for the stack? He asked, the question loaded with condescending curiosity. Surely not. I have my tools, I replied, not giving him the satisfaction of a direct answer. He chuckled, shaking his head as if dealing with a sweetly senile aunt. All right, well, don't be afraid to ask for help when you get stuck on the, modern parts. He patted my shoulder, a gesture that was meant to be friendly but felt like a proclamation of my irrelevance. Good luck, Eleanor. You'll need it. He walked away, rejoining his team to a round of Snickers. I took a deep breath, inhaling the familiar scent of my tea, and let his words wash over me. He thought the challenge was about the modern parts, the AI model and the flashy user interface. He was wrong. The challenge, the real naughty, difficult part of the problem, was in the first half of the theme, the legacy systems. At precisely 9 a.m., Marcus Thorne stepped onto the stage again. All right, hackers, your 48 hours start now. He sounded a ceremonial air horn, and a cheer went up. The datasets are now available on the shared drive. Good luck and may the best code win. A flurry of activity erupted as everyone scrambled to download the data. I calmly navigated to the drive. There it was, a folder named Legacy_Data. Inside were several subfolders, each containing data from a different old client. I clicked into the first one. It was a collection of .dat files, some .csv files with inconsistent delimiters, and a few truly monstrous fixed-width text files that looked like they had been directly exported from a mainframe 30 years ago. There were no schemas, no data dictionaries, no documentation, just raw, chaotic, primordial data. I heard a groan from a nearby table. What is this junk? The column headers in this CSV are all over the place. This one isn't even a text file, another voice complained. I think it's some kind of binary dump. Liam's team was huddled around a large monitor, looking at the files with a mixture of disgust and amusement. Okay, Liam said, taking charge. This is a bit messier than I thought. Kenji, get a Python script going with a bunch of try-except blocks. We'll just have to brute force it. Read it line by line and figure out the patterns. Chloe, you can start mocking up the UI. Don't worry about the data yet, just use dummy JSON. We'll sort this garbage out eventually. He saw it as garbage. I saw it as a history book written in a forgotten dialect. I didn't start coding. Not yet. For the first 2 hours I did what the younger developers, in their rush to build, had neglected to do. I read. I opened each file in my simple text editor, not trying to parse it, but to understand its soul. I looked at the patterns, the inconsistencies. I saw the ghosts of the programmers who had created these files. A fixed width file told me it came from an old COBOL system. The strange delimiters in a CSV file hinted at an export from a proprietary database with a quirky driver. The binary files were trickier, but by examining the hex codes I could start to see repeating structures, headers, and footers. It was like archaeology. I was dusting off pottery shards, trying to piece together the shape of the vessel they once formed. My mind, trained over decades to see systems and patterns, began to connect the dots. These weren't just random files. They were snapshots of businesses from another era. I could almost picture the old green screen terminals where this data was entered, the dot matrix printers that would have churned out reports from it. While others were already writing hundreds of lines of code to handle exceptions and edge cases, I was writing on a legal pad. I drew diagrams. I mapped out the implicit schemas of the different file types. I identified 3 major families of data. I wasn't just planning to attack the data. I was planning to translate it. Only then, with a clear architectural plan in my mind, did I begin to write my first line of code.
Buusa bin Pel.
The shebang line. A declaration of intent. My fingers moved slowly at first, then with increasing speed and confidence. The muscle memory was deep. I wasn't building a complex, multi-layered application like Liam's team. I was building a tool. A single, powerful, elegant tool. A master key designed to unlock these specific, rusted locks. Perl, in its heyday, was celebrated for its text processing capabilities. Its regular expressions were, and in my opinion still are, second to none. It handled files with an efficiency that modern, higher-level languages often struggled to match. It was a language born for this exact task. I started with the fixed-width files. A Python developer might read the file line by line, then use string slicing to extract the data based on character positions. It's a workable but clunky solution. Perl had a function unpack designed for this very purpose. It took a templateous string describing the layout of the data and could parse an entire line in a single lightning-fast operation. I spent some time meticulously crafting the unpack templates for each of the fixed-width file layouts I had identified. It was like composing a piece of music. Each code represented a different field type, a different length. My $ID, $name, $date, $amount, equals unpack, A10, A30, A8, A12, $_. One line. Clean, expressive, and incredibly fast. It took the raw line of text, $_, and neatly unpacked it into 4 variables. Next, the messy CSV files. Some used commas, some used tabs, some used semicolons. Some had quoted fields, others didn't. Writing a robust parser for this in most languages would be a pain. I could have used a library, but I wanted to keep my tool lean with no external dependencies. So, I wrote a regular expression. It was a beautiful, terrifying thing. A dense string of characters that looked like gibberish to the uninitiated. Brackets, parentheses, backslashes, and sigils. But to me it was poetry. It was a logical statement that described every possible permutation of the messy data I had observed. It could handle different delimiters, quoted fields containing delimiters, and all the other quirks I had found. It was flexible, powerful, and compact. Richard would have been proud. By late afternoon, I had the core parsing logic for all 3 data families. While other teams were still wrestling with data ingestion, I was already transforming the data into a single, clean, consistent format. A simple, well-structured JSON output. I worked with a quiet, steady rhythm. Every 90 minutes I would get up, stretch, walk to the window, and look at the city. I would refill my thermos from the hot water dispenser, pointedly ignoring the siren call of the energy drinks. I was pacing myself. This was a marathon, not a sprint. Around 6 p.m., the smell of pizza filled the atrium. The teams descended on the boxes like hungry wolves. I saw Liam, his face flushed with a mixture of excitement and stress, grabbing 3 slices. He saw me sitting at my corner table, nibbling on a sandwich I had brought from home. He walked over, his mouth full of pizza. "How's the fossil holding up?" he asked, trying to sound jovial. "Made any progress with your, script?" "It's coming along," I said calmly. "You know," he said, leaning in conspiratorially, "if you're in over your head, it's no shame to tap out. This is a pretty high-level challenge. We're already running into some complexities with the data stream that would probably stump most junior devs." "I'm managing," I said. "How is your Python pipeline handling the binary files?" His confident expression flickered for a fraction of a second. "Oh, that. Yeah, we're still working on that part. It's some weird proprietary format. We're probably just going to have to write a custom deserializer. It's tedious but not complex." I knew from my analysis that it wasn't a proprietary format. It was a standard, if old format called packdecimal. It was a way for old mainframe systems to store numbers more efficiently than in plain text. Modern languages didn't have built-in support for it because it was considered ancient. But Perl, being a child of that era, had a module for it. A standard module, included in the default installation. I had already incorporated it. "I see," I said, taking a slow bite of my sandwich. "Well, good luck with your deserializer." He gave me a strange look, a flicker of uncertainty, before shrugging and walking back to his team. He couldn't comprehend that I might know something he didn't. His worldview simply didn't allow for it. As evening deepened into night, the atmosphere in the room changed. The initial buzz of excitement gave way to a more focused, tense silence, punctuated by bursts of frantic typing and muttered curses. The sugar high had worn off, and the reality of the 48-hour deadline was setting in. Many of the younger developers used to sprinting were starting to look frayed around the edges. I, however, felt a calm sense of flow. The world outside my monitor had disappeared. It was just me, my terminal, and the ghost of Richard smiling over my shoulder. The code flowed from my fingers, clean and purposeful. By 10 p.m. I had a single robust script. It could be pointed at any of the legacy data folders, and it would recursively scan for files, identify their type, parse them using the appropriate logic, normalize the data, and stream it out as a continuous flow of clean JSON objects to standard output. It was a thing of beauty in its brutalist efficiency. It was less than 300 lines of code. At 11 p.m., while many others were preparing to pull an all-nighter, I began to pack my bag. I saved my work, shut down my laptop, and rinsed out my thermos. Kenji from Liam's team saw me as he was returning from the coffee machine, his eyes red-rimmed and bloodshot. "You're leaving?" he asked, his voice thick with exhaustion. "I'm going home to get some sleep," I said. He stared at me as if I just announced I was going to fly to the moon. "But it's a hackathon. The code will still be here in the morning," I replied with a small smile. "A tired mind makes mistakes. Rest is part of the process." He just shook his head and shuffled back to his team, who were now arguing about a memory leak in their Python script. They were throwing more and more resources at the problem, trying to brute force a solution. They were building a skyscraper on a swamp. I walked out of the humming, artificially lit office into the cool night air. The city was a glittering tapestry below. I felt a profound sense of peace. I wasn't just writing code. I was telling a story about how the old and the new could and should coexist. A story that Liam, in his hubris, had forgotten how to read. I went home, slept for 8 hours, and dreamt of clean data and elegant algorithms. I returned to the office at 7 the next morning, feeling refreshed and clear-headed. The atrium looked like the aftermath of a battlefield. Several people were asleep on beanbag chairs, their faces illuminated by the eerie glow of their laptop screens. The air was thick with the smell of stale pizza and desperation. The leftover donuts sat forlornly in their boxes, picked over and sad. Liam's team was still at it. Their whiteboard was now an incomprehensible mess of crossed-out diagrams and angry-looking arrows. Liam himself was pacing back and forth, his hair disheveled, talking into his phone. "I don't care what the library docs say, it's not handling the edge cases. It keeps crashing." Chloe, the front-end developer, was staring blankly at her screen, which displayed a beautifully designed but entirely empty dashboard. She had built a fancy car with no engine. I returned to my quiet corner, fired up my laptop and poured myself a cup of tea. The second phase of the challenge was to feed the process data into the company's new AI model. The model had a simple API endpoint. You sent it a JSON object with the clean data, and it would return a JSON object with its analysis. This was the part everyone had been excited about, but it was contingent on solving the first, boring part. I opened my script. Now, I needed to pipe the output of my parser into a new piece of code that would handle the API calls. I could have written a second script, but for elegance and efficiency, I decided to keep it all in one. Perl's ability to handle system commands and pipes was legendary. With a few more lines of code, I integrated an HTTP client library and added the logic. My script would now parse a legacy file, transform a record into JSON, and immediately post it to the AI endpoint. It would then process the AI's response and format it into a human-readable report. It was a complete end-to-end solution, a seamless, efficient pipeline. I decided to add one small feature, a final touch. I made the script highly configurable with command line flags. You could tell it to run in dry run mode, which would parse the files without calling the AI. Or you could specify which data family to process, or how many records to send. It was a professional tool, not just the hackathon project. By midday I was finished. The entire solution was contained in a single Perl file. It had no external dependencies beyond what was standard on any Linux system. It was small, portable, and fiercely powerful. I spent the next few hours testing it. I threw every weird file I could find at it. I tried to break it, but the core logic was sound. The regular expressions held. The unpacked templates were flawless. Just worked. With hours to spare before the 4 p.m. deadline, I wrote documentation. I created a simple README file explaining what the script did, how it worked, and how to use the various command line flags. This was another step no one else would likely take, but for me it was essential. Good code wasn't just about making the computer understand, it was about making other humans understand. It was an act of communication. As the deadline approached, the frenzy in the room reached its peak. There were panicked cries of, "Just commit it! And it works on my machine." Liam's team had apparently abandoned their Python pipeline, and were now trying to manually clean up a small subset of the data in a spreadsheet, just to have something to show. Their ambitious, containerized, microservice-based solution had crumbled under the weight of messy reality. At 4 p.m. sharp, Marcus called time. "All right, everyone, hands off the keyboards. Time for presentations. We'll go in the order you signed up." My team name, The Fossil, was near the end of the list. I sat back, sipped my tea and watched. Team after team presented. Most had something to show, usually a flashy dashboard with some visualizations based on a tiny, hand-picked sample of the data. When questioned by the judges, a panel consisting of Marcus, our CTO, and a senior engineer from our cloud provider, their solutions revealed their fragility. "So your solution only works with the comma-separated files?" the CTO asked one team. "Well, yes, we focused on the most common format first." "And what's the processing speed?" she asked another. "It's a bit slow right now, but we're confident we can optimize the database writes." Then it was the AI vendor's turn. Liam, looking exhausted but still trying to project an aura of supreme confidence, took the stage. Chloe brought up their UI on the big screen. It was undeniably beautiful. It had dark mode, pulsing graphs, and smooth animations. "What you see here," Liam began, his voice a bit hoarse, "is a next-generation AI-driven analytics platform. We've built a scalable, cloud-native architecture too. He launched into a torrent of buzzwords. The CTO, a woman named Dr. Eris Thorne who did not suffer fools gladly and happened to be Marcus's far more technical sister, cut him off. That's a lovely interface, Mr. O'Connell. Can you show us how it works? Let's use the dataset from client 734, the one with the mixed fixed width and binary files. Liam's confident posture faltered. Well, we're still integrating the full range of data sources. Our parser is optimized for the more modern formats. For the demo, we've prepared a sample from client 912, which uses a standard CSV format. He quickly ran his demo. The beautiful dashboard flickered, then populated with some generic-looking charts. It was clear the data was either faked or heavily sanitized. So, your solution to the legacy systems problem was to ignore the most difficult legacy systems? Dr. Thorne asked, her voice laced with ice. It's a proof of concept, Liam stammered. The architecture is designed to be extensible. I see, she said, making a note on her tablet. Her expression was unimpressed. Thank you. Liam slunk off the stage, his face a mask of frustration and humiliation. Finally, it was my turn. And last but not least, Marcus announced, looking at his list with a slightly confused expression. Team. The fossil? A few snickers rippled through the audience. I walked to the stage, my old laptop in hand. I didn't use the main presentation screen. I just plugged my laptop in and mirrored its display. The audience was now looking at my simple black terminal window. It was a stark contrast to the slick UIs they had been seeing all day. Good afternoon. I began, my voice calm and steady in the quiet room. My solution is a single self-contained script. It has no dependencies beyond a standard Perl installation. It's designed to be a robust, efficient tool for processing all of the provided legacy data formats and feeding them to the AI model. I could see Liam in the front row, a look of utter disbelief on his face. He leaned over and whispered something to Kenji, who shook his head. Instead of building a graphical interface, I continued. I focused on the core of the problem, the data itself. The script is operated from the command line. I turned to the judges. Dr. Thorne, you mentioned client 734. Which file would you like to process? She looked intrigued. Let's try the largest one. The archive_FI 1988 bin file. It was the packed decimal binary file, the one that had stumped Liam's team. Very well, I said. My fingers moved to the keyboard. The audience watched in silence as I typed a single command. /fossil.pl. File equals legacy_data/client. 734/archive_FI 1988. Verbose. I pressed enter. Instantly the screen filled with text. Line after line of clean, formatted output scrolled by at an incredible speed. For each record in the binary file, my script was printing the parsed data, the JSON it sent to the AI, and the analysis it received back. It was a waterfall of information, a torrent of success. In less than 10 seconds it was finished. The entire massive binary file had been processed. The terminal prompt sat there blinking placidly. A stunned silence fell over the room. No one was snickering now. The script, I explained, first identified the file as a packed decimal binary. It then used a native function to unpack the data, record by record. Each record was converted to a JSON object sent to the AI, and the response was logged. It processed all 2.5 million records in the file in 8.7 seconds. The CTO, Dr. Thorne, was leaning forward, her eyes wide. You wrote a parser for packed decimal from scratch in 48 hours? I didn't have to, I said. I used a standard library. The key wasn't writing a new tool, but knowing the right old tool to use. Show us the fixed width file, the third judge, the engineer said, his voice hushed. I typed another command, pointing the script at the monstrous fixed width file. Again, the result was instantaneous. A torrent of perfectly parsed data. And the messy CSV? Marcus asked, looking dumbfounded. Another command. Another flawless, lightning-fast execution. I spent the next 5 minutes demonstrating the script's other features, the dry run mode, The ability to output to a file instead of the console. The clear and concise help message I had written. I didn't have a flashy UI. I had something far more valuable. A solution that worked. A solution that was elegant, efficient, and complete. When I finished, there was a long pause. The room was utterly silent. Then Dr. Thorne started to clap. Slowly at first, then more enthusiastically. The other two judges joined in. Soon the entire room was applauding. It wasn't the polite corporate applause from the meetings. It was genuine, astonished applause. I looked at Liam. His face was pale. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a look of profound, world-altering shock. It was the look of a man who had just watched a dinosaur build a spaceship. He wasn't just beaten. His entire philosophy had been invalidated. An hour later, Marcus and Dr. Thorne stood on the stage to announce the winner. The judges were unanimous, Dr. Thorne said, her voice carrying a weight it hadn't had before. While we saw many impressive user interfaces and ambitious architectures, there was one submission that stood out for its sheer elegance, its profound understanding of the problem, and its flawless execution. It was a masterclass in efficiency and engineering. The winner of the 2023 Innovatech Hackathon is the Fossil. My name. She said my name, Eleanor Vance, after that. But all I heard was the name I had chosen for myself. The insult I had reclaimed and turned into a badge of honor. Walking back to my desk with the oversized novelty check, I felt a quiet sense of vindication. It wasn't triumphant or loud. It was the deep, satisfying calm of a point well made. Later, as I was packing my things, Liam approached my desk. The usual swagger was gone. He looked smaller, humbled. He stood there for a moment, shifting his weight, unable to meet my eyes. "Eleanor," he said, his voice quiet. That script. That was." He trailed off, searching for the right word. "Incredible." "Thank you, Liam," I said. He finally looked at me. "The regular expression you use for the CSVs. I saw it on the screen. I've never seen anything like it. And the unpack function. I had to look it up. It's been there all along." "It has," I said. "Pearl," he said, the word sounding different in his mouth now. Not a joke, but a question. "I always thought it was just for old legacy CGI scripts." "A tool is only as good as the person using it," I replied, quoting an old saying of Richard's. "And a good craftsman knows all of their tools, not just the newest ones." He nodded slowly, a genuine understanding dawning in his eyes for the first time. "Yeah," he said. "I guess I have a lot to learn." He hesitated. "Would you, sometime, be willing to show me how it works? The script, I mean. I'd like to understand it." It was the closest he would ever come to an apology, and it was more than enough. It was an admission of ignorance, a request for knowledge. It was the beginning of respect. "I'd be happy to," I said. As I rode the elevator down, I looked at my reflection in the polished steel doors. I didn't see a fossil. I saw a woman who knew her worth. The victory wasn't about beating Liam. It was about reminding myself and the world around me that experience is not the same as being outdated. Wisdom is not a liability. And sometimes the most powerful solutions are not found in the noisy, glittering future, but in the quiet, dusty archives of the past, waiting for a patient hand to bring them back into the light. The language wasn't dead. It had just been waiting for the right problem to solve. We often find ourselves in a world that relentlessly chases the new, often at the expense of the tried and true. We're told to constantly reinvent ourselves, to shed our old skins, to adapt or become obsolete. But what if there's value in the things we've carried with us? What if our history, our experience, is not a burden but our greatest strength? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever felt underestimated because of your age or experience? Have you ever found a surprising power in an outdated skill or piece of knowledge? Your stories are the heart of this community. Thank you for listening to her revenge arc. If this story resonated with you, please consider giving it a like, sharing it with someone who might need to hear it, and subscribing for more stories like this one. Until next time, be well.